Last time on the Joe Schmo Sports Show.
What's going on, fellas? We need you here because we have this steroids and sports stuff that you said you have a lot of insight on, or a lot of.
I understand why you wouldn't want your athletes to be stronger, more aggressive, higher performers. If you're a lily white-handed church goer who doesn't want to do performance-enhancing drugs, you shouldn't be a professional athlete. The known playing field is a bunch of people who are paying money to be on a program.
Yes.
What percentage of athletes do you figure are utilizing performance-enhancing drugs?
99.9%.
I was about to say, take out UFC from this.
No. I mean,
okay.
I'm talking about football, baseball,
99.9%.
basketball, all of that. If 99.9% of them are doing it, how are they not getting caught?
They have a program. So if you notice, if you look at places where drug testing is prevalent, they're doing unannounced random drug tests, but they're not testing premier athletes. Like if you look when the scandals happen and people are pissing hot, it's all mid-tier athletes. Mm-hmm. They're just famous enough for people to know who they are, but like you're not talking about like Tom Brady isn't getting.
I was just going to say
he's not
Tom Brady.
He's not going to piss hot for freaking testosterone because Tom Brady knows like the NFL can't have Tom Brady piss hot for something.
So why is it frowned upon, or not frowned upon, it's straight up illegal in sports to administer something to yourself or have a doctor do it that makes you heal faster? So why isn't it everybody?
It isn't actually illegal. Like a lot of it,
they're all getting prescriptions.
Yes,
all these guys are
but
getting
Will
prescriptions
Fuller, for example, so he has history. He's a great wide receiver. Has a history of hamstring issues. Like has not ever been able to complete a full season because of hamstring and or quad issues on the exact same leg every time. So he got popped, taken performance-enhancing drugs is what they said. They call it PEDs because that's what they call everything. But it was to make sure that he was healing and staying healed.
Technically,
that's what they all say.
That's the purpose.
Right.
That's the purpose of steroids.
Right. Well, but it wasn't for him to get bigger. I mean, he's a wiry guy. You know, he's
so
6'1".
Your genetics do play a huge role in that. And if your body is predisposed, I guess is the right word for it. If your body's predisposed for certain types of injuries, or your body, let's say his hamstrings are the one point on his body that are more prone to breakdown.
Weak. Right.
Yeah. So for him, that might be something that he personally is dealing with. But for him, I would have said, stem cell. I would have said to go do down to Argentina.
You can't do that either.
Well, you can. We're in a weird place too, where the NFL is an interesting conundrum because the NFL doesn't actually their players aren't an asset to the NFL.
Right.
They have to pay for all of their own medical care out of their own pocket. So, I mean, it's a weird situation to be in where you're like, hey, my moneymaker is my legs, and I know that I need another season in the NFL to pay for all the expenses I've racked up. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to take things into my own hands. And these guys it's not like I can go down the street and look in the phone book and be like, best doctor for steroids. You know what I mean? You should be able to, though. You should. I mean, just like plastic surgeons, you should be able to be like, hey, what is a track record? What is this doctor's track record with getting people's hormones where they should be? We're not talking about boosting somebody's testosterone, like bodybuilders and stuff that are taking grams of steroids to look unnatural, to get huge. Those guys are a little bit of a different. They're an exception. The sport is aesthetic. And, they're doing this thing intentionally, and it's always on the black market. But from an athlete perspective, if we were to talk about just naturally occurring testosterone, the scales vary based on the medical center that you're going to. So if you're at UNC, it's different than Johns Hopkins. It's different. The sample sizes that they're picking are from their own research. So at UNC, the normal range is something like 395 to 900,
which is crazy because 395 is that of
that's
60.
That's 18.
Super low.
That's the average. So to clarify, just say it's 300 to 900. That is an average testosterone level sampled from 18 to 80-year-old sample, an 18 to 80-year-old sample population. Well, holy shit, man. Like an 18-year-old has totally different testosterone than an 80-year-old. Why are they lumped together in like the appropriate range for someone who's 32?
It's crazy.
We don't know what the right levels are by age or experience. We don't even know what the right is. So like when you talk to a good doctor who's dealing with like hormone replacement stuff, he'll just be like, we're trying to look for the minimum effective dose where you feel good without side effects.
So why doesn't the FDA say that there needs to be a smaller range?
So that's actually funny you should say that. Based on the samples that they're using, they vary. So like when I first went to Cleveland Clinic, I think the range was like 200 to 1,200 there. And that's a very, again, an even broader range, right?
Yes.
But who's to say that like I like to be at 11 or 1,200 and someone else feels perfectly fine. They have no erectile dysfunction. They're not holding extra fat. They're not lethargic at 400. Like that's normal.
What's the normal male 18 to 35?
No one knows.
It's all based on your specific body, how you feel, because I've noticed psychological stuff when I'm running a gram. When I ran a gram, I went from that 210 pounds up to 252.
I mean, increased aggression, stuff like that. It's not a universal thing. That's like the biggest in my mind. What we're seeing, the campaign in the developed world against steroids has to do with two things. It's a sense. What is it?
I just Googled average testosterone levels at 18 to 35-year-old men. It said 270 to 1070.
If you're at 270, If you're at 270, you're hating your life.
I was at, I think I was below 80
such a huge range
when I went in.
That's crazy.
No. I was literally. My lead levels were super high. This had a lot to do with like deployment stuff.
Yeah.
But like when I went in and had my testosterone levels checked, I was like going in because I was like, I just feel a little depressed, and like maybe they'll give me tests and I'll like feel good again and I'll go crush workouts. And then when I saw what my numbers were, I was like, get the fuck out of here. I'm dying.
Yeah.
Literally. What's wrong with me?
So I want to pull back a little bit because you were just about to get into this conversation about what you were. I think you were framing it as the campaign in developed nations against performance enhancement.
Yeah, against
drugs.
performance enhancement.
So
it's emotions.
So
the idea of fairness, like we think that sports should be a fair and balanced playing field.
So let me step back because I'm going to play Karen's advocate here for a little
Cool.
bit. Because the vast majority of people, they hear performance-enhancing drugs, they think cheater.
God, Karen, you are so stupid.
They think, detrimental to your health.
Integrity.
Integrity. There's all sorts of things. So I want to address...
Anytime someone uses the word integrity, to me, I assume that they're covering up their own failings.
I get that.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Literally, when people are like, well, you don't have any integrity, I was like, you must be a real loser.
Okay, so first thing is the impact that has on children who are getting into sports, the desire to be like the athlete.
This is
why we have to mask it.
This is Mothers Against Drunk Driving in a nutshell, right? It's literally saying you have a bunch of angry moms whose kids died or were adversely affected by premature steroids use in high school sports. And by a lot, I don't mean a lot. There's like a few cases that the parents were so upset and they created funds to create this misinformation campaign about performance enhancement drugs. It's like all in the memory of their kid.
To go on your point, what you're saying is those that we can't take away from those athletes that are on a professional level. So for those kids who are looking up to their favorite star, those people who are thinking like, oh my God, I want to be like Mike.
Right.
Those athletes, we cannot take away the fact that they are amazing athletes, that they are genetically gifted, that they've either put in the work, the time, or whatever it is to get to that point.
Yes.
Now,
but if I take enough
it's weird. It's
doses,
weird too.
I could get there in the mind of
You're
the
not
child.
You're not wrong. If we were to do more research,
that comes down to education.
Would be really nice if we could do more research. There are studies out there on mice and the use of testosterone on mice, which show that mice their muscles recover more quickly. So two study groups of mice. You have mice who are exercising without anabolic steroids and mice who are exercising. They have one dose of anabolic steroids and cycle off. So two mice who are ostensibly not juicing, and they're not on steroids.
Sure.
The mouse that had one dose of anabolic steroids early on in its life will forever recover faster than a mouse that has never received a dose of testosterone.
That makes sense.
So the idea of us continually having to take steroids is something that we've gotten from bodybuilders. You could literally be like Lance Armstrong. Maybe he didn't even need to dope long term. I mean, a lot of what he was doing was like blood
oxygen doping.
Yeah, oxygenation.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
But I mean, you're literally talking about like for muscle structure and building. Like it could be you take one 12-week cycle when you're 20, and it's going to benefit you for the rest of your life. We don't know that, but we assume that that's the case.
So
guys get addicted to the gains and seeing a forever upward trajectory. So it's a psychological thing where guys aren't tracking their numbers. So they're on a cycle and then they get off of it and they see their numbers starting to drop and they freak the fuck out because their whole existence is like being able to pull 500 pounds. Ooh. And then they are like, oh shit, I got to get back on it. And then you're like, hey man, maybe you should take care of yourself.
So should, going back to the kids again, should children be able to, or should they be able to do this? Is that advisable? If it's advisable, at what age? Because is there a possibility that this gets involved in physical development?
This is a deep hole.
Yeah. Right, it is a deep hole, but
because you're talking about like what we're really talking about is endocrine function, right? In the end, what we're really talking about is as professional athletes, we're looking to supercharge the endocrine system.
Sure.
As college and high school athletes, we're talking about an ostensibly functional endocrine system that is working the way our higher power, however you say
whatever
it.
you want, right?
Yeah,
insert here, right?
Has created our body to function, and there hasn't been anything to disrupt that yet. I think one of the biggest issues that people have with steroids usage at younger ages is that because it's not appropriately administered and it's kids kind of guessing and reading on the internet because there's not a lot of information.
It's YouTube
kids
knowledge.
are crashing their endocrine system early, and then having to supplement to maintain normal function for the rest of their lives. So like that is obviously it's a real problem. I don't think
going back, should doctors then be able to prescribe to kids or do the same types of
kids
programs that professional athletes are doing?
Kids are it's a weird thing because we're really talking a gray area right now too, right?
Yeah.
So like I don't advocate. While I think that PEDs are perfectly acceptable for pro athletes to use,
that was my next
honestly,
question.
even collegiate athletes,
I got something on that.
I would say that I think there should be a legal age where someone makes a choice whether they want to use them or not, like 18, whatever, right? I don't care. I also think that if you're taking them and it's a public thing, like you shouldn't be shamed, but there probably should be an asterisk by your name. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, man.
I mean, that's been discussed, especially with the baseball stuff. Yep. I mean, that's definitely been discussed.
So the only problem when it comes to professional sports is if you're making that company or you're making that league enough money, you're going to be protected to a certain extent. The other problem that comes along with that is that they're hiring doctors to give you the TRT, so it's no longer an illegal thing.
Right.
Yeah. It's being completely covered. To answer your question about kids, I talked to a hormone replacement therapist, and I wouldn't have done it until I was 25. Personally speaking,
when your brain stops developing.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think that you, especially as guys, we're all kind of kids at heart forever. But when I turned 25, there was a switch that happened for me mentally, and I just started being a little bit more responsible and started thinking a little bit more about like my health. Because when I woke up at 25, everything hurt on my body.
Wait till you're 40.
Oh, I know.
I thought that was normal.
So for the whole thing with kids, there's not enough education. There's not enough honest education out there when it comes to it. I personally want to see...
But it's that way with all drugs.
Exactly,
all drugs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to steroids and it comes to all this kind of stuff, I saw guys in high school that were on it, and they were freak athletes because they were young and they were on it. They had such a competitive edge.
Exactly.
But they were abusing the hell out of it. And
it's
some
such
of the
a weird
guys
thing because I feel like it's mostly... There's subsets of athletes in high school that use it.
Yep.
And
football players.
I typically think
baseball.
This is a totally anecdotal observation, so feel free to everyone that hears it and doesn't like it can just shit on it because it's about all it's worth. But
don't at Sofleet, please.
Like the kids that are using that in high school are peaking early.
Exactly.
And they don't make it.
So
you don't
I think,
see kids that the people who make it into the pros are getting there based on an age set. And the better coaching, select teams,
right?
And they're peaking later. They're not early bloomers.
On that point,
yep.
I think that it becomes an acceptable thing once you have gone through your collegiate phase. If you've proven yourself as a athlete, as a quote unquote natural athlete through middle school, high school, and you've gotten selected through your college sports and you've been successful there, if you are on the trajectory of making it into a pro league where there's millions and millions of dollars at stake,
sure,
you're supporting not only yourself but you're supporting family. Like, there's a lot of factors that go into that. I think that steroids could be a considered thing, if not a recommended thing, at least testosterone, not necessarily all the other types of.
It increases your longevity. It increases your health. Like a lot of things, especially in sports where TBI is a legitimate thing, extra testosterone actually goes a long way to mediate the brain swelling and stuff that comes along with TBIs.
CTE too.
Yeah.
Well, CTE, we shouldn't even get into that. That fucking doctor's a fucking idiot.
That's another podcast. So I'm going to regress back from that though.
Yep.
If the idea is that millions of dollars are at stake and there's a limited number of roster spots on 32 NFL teams on some,
they should go to the best.
So they're right. The question is then, people start taking them in college to be able to get drafted, right? Because they need to stand out so that they can make those millions of dollars.
College is pro.
College
is pro
It
sports.
is, but they're not necessarily getting paid those dollars.
Right. Those college athletes are trying harder
the
than
colleges. The athletes aren't.
But you step back into high school and you go, okay, in order to have the opportunity to get to those professional sports, I have to be a scholarship athlete in one of these top tier programs in college, so I need to juice here in order to
the pressure's
get one of those
the pressure's
spots.
on.
The pressure's huge.
Well,
absolutely.
There's no real way to you can't regulate it though. It's so much money to test in high school. It'd be so much money to
the
get
same
this
problem as
across
every other
the board.
drug.
Exactly.
But this is where we get into why, as a libertarian, I think that we should legalize and regulate everything, because by making it a gray market or a black market event, we have no control over it.
Right.
And then we act shocked when people do what they naturally do. You're like, these people have no integrity. I'm going to use that buzzword.
It's the clutching of
the pearls, yes.
It also comes down to that athlete, how much sacrifice, because all these athletes talk about, I put the hours and I did all the work. How much sacrifice are you willing to put in? Are you willing to change your body's genetics to get to that level to where you're going to be paid millions of dollars and you're going to be that star? You're going to be that pro.
The answer is yes.
Yes,
Every
the answer
that's
is yes.
like asking a dude if he wants an extra inch on his dick.
Exactly.
Hey, would you be willing to put in the work for an extra inch?
I would not be willing to buy the pill from Ron Jeremy though.
Does it work?
60% of the time, it works every time.
So the
hedgehog knows.
The question then for me is, how much should we be putting then into the technique development? Because I think, to your point earlier about the guys who juice in high school and they stand out and then they flame out because they they were physically more gifted for either natural reasons or because of enhancements, right? They didn't learn how to shoot the ball, hit the ball, throw the pitch, have the technique. And is there an argument for keeping younger amateur athletes off of that in order to force them to develop more technique in order to get to that?
You're never going to get there without the skill set.
This is parenting, bro.
Yeah.
It's literally like, hey, man, I have an asshole kid.
Pardon my French, but you're an asshole.
Actually, I have two asshole kids.
Who is he?
He's an asshole, sir.
I know that. What's his name?
That is his name, sir. Asshole. Major asshole.
I love them.
Everybody who has a teenager has an asshole.
No, they're
kid.
great, man.
Yep.
They're great, but
I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes.
At 14 with my oldest, who's now 18, 13 probably, I watched my wife engage in a war of attrition with her while I was deployed, where it was like, I'm taking this away, and I'm taking this away. And finally, the kid was like, she was like, fuck it, I don't care. You've taken everything that matters to me. I'm going to do whatever I want, and you can't punish me. And that's how it is when it comes to this kind of stuff, which is to say, well, how are we controlling it? We only have punitive measures in place right now. We can only discipline kids for doing the wrong thing. We can't actually find a constructive way of making them choose for themselves what they think is the right thing to do. Sure. I think this is like weed, man, where it's like, yo, if you think, I don't care who's listening to this podcast, if you can objectively look at the way we consume alcohol in America, compare it to the effects of marijuana, and then tell me that alcohol isn't a more destructive drug than marijuana. So we have a prohibition on marijuana, and we're preventing people from consuming it in a responsible manner.
Sort of.
Well, I mean, sort of, yes.
It's changed over the last 20 years.
It is changing, but the lack of eliminating the state of prohibition is what's allowing people to make more educated choices about, in Colorado, people are driving high now. Motherfucker, people have been driving high in Colorado for a long time.
And everywhere else. Literally everywhere else.
I think when it comes to steroids for the professional setting, for the professional athletes, it either needs to be adopted by every single team across the board to where it can be regulated by those doctors, or it needs to be something to where they're willing to foot the bill to test every single player every single time.
So and I mean, like when we say every single time,
otherwise it's going to slip through the cracks.
You have to test these dudes,
all of them.
Yeah,
every single
even the highest paid athletes.
It needs to be every other week.
Well, so I got. I mean, we have probably about 10 more minutes before we need to wrap this up. So let's. I do have something.
Podcast.
It's crazy, right? So I have. It's about 55 minutes. I have something that I want to ask you, or that I want to put out there on this subject. So. There was during this college football bowl season. Now, I don't know how much you pay attention, Doug.
I mean, I know that my Aggies didn't get into any real bowl games, so I eschewed the whole thing.
Stop, Doug. Let's
Damn Ohio State.
Stop a second. Hold on.
Thanks to coronavirus, we finally finished a season in the top 10.
All right. So first of all, they did make a real bowl game. They didn't make the college football playoffs, but the Orange Bowl is a highly decorated game. And you beat my Tar Heels.
If you're a loser.
Yeah, sure. You beat my Tar Heels, so we have integrity, right?
If you ain't first, you're last.
So my thing is that UNC playing your Aggies had their top two running backs, top two in the country running backs out because they were going to the NFL draft.
Why they lost.
The number one wide receiver, definitely not why we lost. The number one wide receiver for us, right, for UNC, out. The number one All-American middle linebacker, out. Because they didn't want to get hurt going to the league.
Which makes sense.
Right? Yeah. So we had 4,000 yards of offense on the sideline and one of the best middle linebackers in the country. Now, that is not why we lost, but that's not what we're talking about. So what we need, what I'm wondering is, they all said they wanted to protect their future and not get hurt in the last game of their collegiate career before they went to the NFL.
It's a Boobie Miles moment. Nobody wants to be that guy.
Right. So, but if you're saying, like, what we're saying here is if they allowed, like, usage throughout for repair.
I don't think that steroids prevent injury. If anything, they actually put guys into a higher performance zone that opens them up to more injury.
But don't you think that if they knew that when they got to the league they had access to things that help them heal faster? Because in NFL there is no guaranteed contract.
No, but they have access to that.
They
anyway.
do. Well, they
Physical
might not.
Therapists,
right? But they might not know the ins and outs of the special doctors that the NFL teams have, or
they're
whatever.
Aware of it.
I think they're probably already on it.
So, well, I hope you know what. And if that's the case, great. But then why are they sitting out?
Well, because they can still get injured, man.
No, I know.
Have you ever been hit by a vending machine at 20 miles an hour?
No, and I don't want to.
That's what they're getting.
Why I didn't play football.
But the high level athletes, I like.
I played tennis.
You're looking these athletes. They're like scalpels, right? The knife is super sharp and it's meant for a specific purpose. But if you try to freaking open a toolbox that's locked with it, you're gonna roll the edge.
Yeah,
like it's not made for that. And these guys are all training to be good at a peak performance moment. Like, hey, man, like my whole like undulating periodized cycle is based on a game that I know is going to be this time, and a game that I know is going to be this time, and a game I know is going to be this time. And everything else is moving to peak the athlete for that specific hour and a half event. That's what training is about. Those guys can get on a program and be good. Also, there's so many unknowns. Why would a dude who's about to make $1 million plus a year as a scrub in the NFL?
Risk tearing an ACL.
Yeah, risk tearing an ACL.
Right.
Like, I'm an idiot, man. Like I'm 40 years old and have managed. I mean, I've been blown up, a bunch of other crap, and I've managed to avoid most major injuries. I decided to get into backcountry skiing over Christmas.
You blow your knee
and
out.
I think I blow my ACL out. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I'm an idiot. You know, like I didn't do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu extensively while I was in most of my military stuff because I watched dudes all get hurt on the mat, and I'm like, those guys are idiots. Why? You don't have to be good at fighting. I got 13 other dudes with me, and we all have guns. Like, I'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, I need to know the basics, and I need to move on.
Trust me, my body feels about 50 years old. My neck, all of it.
It's hard on you.
Well,
man.
it's like that age old thing. It's like, you know, you're with a friend and you start getting chased by a bear. You don't have to be faster than the bear.
You gotta be faster than the friend.
Exactly.
So why then is there such
that's really good to end
a
on.
stigma
taboo?
That's a social stigma, man. It's the same thing as weed. It's where it's like, hey, because we've thought of it as bad for so long, no one's willing to readdress the way they view it as a socially stigmatizing thing. I will draw a parallel that may resonate with the listeners based on age set. But I grew up in the Bible Belt in the 90s, and homosexuality was a sin, and we did not credit it. We went to church, and those people, we love the sinner, not the sin. I'm not saying anything because I feel a certain way about gay people in general, but even my super evangelical parents have a very different outlook on homosexuality now, mostly in part to the fact that there's been a full court media press from the real world on about how, like, homosexuality, even though it's a minority subset in the population, is normal, and it is something that happens, and is not like a pariah or a sin or whatever else. The same thing will have to happen for, like, weed is becoming normalized in media.
It's whatever light they decide to paint it in. So if steroids and all this stuff, these performance-enhancing drugs, get painted in a certain light that becomes acceptable on social media platforms or even mass media platforms, the idea behind it will start to change. Will it take time? Absolutely. It's going to take a lot of time. But people they're stupid if they don't think that those athletes, those top athletes, they might have a prescription for it, but they're still on it.
Do you think it's because the government doesn't have a way to regulate it?
They
would be able to
hell
regulate it.
Well, but they don't have. I assume they don't have an idea now, or it would be legal, right? Because anything that they can do to make a buck.
Do you know how much money a hormone therapist makes?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how much money really. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of money in black market steroids, but I feel like it's not anything compared to, like, recreational party drugs.
But see, that's what people were talking about marijuana. If it got legalized as a whole in the country, how the government would try to regulate it. Number one, it would be so far down as in quality because they had to mass produce whatever. So would it be the same thing for the steroids? You think?
That was a hollow argument, right? Like, we found that the quality of marijuana,
it's only getting better,
and like the oversight. Yeah, it's just getting better. Yeah, I get it. I mean,
not to get too political on a sports podcast, but my perception is that there's not going to be a change on the government level because it's an issue that both sides of the political spectrum can get up on their soapbox and together point at somebody and say,
but
they are
marijuana
being
was the
bad
same
people.
way.
Exactly.
Which I think it's worth pointing out that, like, attitudes in this are already changing. Like, the clutching of pearls about Lance Armstrong, he's back on the media, still a darling. He's still a guy that people credit as having won a bunch of Tour de France.
And he did that, and everybody else was doing the same.
Yes.
Yep. Which I mean, it wasn't much of an argument at the time, but it's definitely, I believe, a valid argument. I mean, here's the thing, man. If we want to talk about it, this is how people see it relates to them. It's like what you brought up at the beginning about integrity and whatever else, and like how people have this idea about fairness.
Yeah.
50-year-old soccer moms who are voting, they are perfectly happy with their husband's dick not working. Like, they're like, oh, this dude's test is low. Like, he doesn't pester me to, like, fuck every night.
For everything.
They can focus whatever sexual energy they have on a pool boy or
Gardner.
Whatever the random dude is.
The gym.
But if their husband suddenly gets access to legal testosterone and has morning wood every day,
hey, it's fuck time.
He's a real inconvenience. This fat dude's little dick works again. Like,
I gotta disagree.
Why did I
with
suffer
that.
for 20 years of marriage?
We got Cialis, we got Viagra. It's worse now because at least if he had some legal testosterone, he would have somewhat of a more muscular body than just being like a fat sack.
Maybe
I don't think like shit. You're gonna look like shit, man.
Yeah, man. It doesn't matter how much testosterone you're on. It's not like making your body just burn fat, like because your test levels are higher. It just makes you more motivated to get in.
Well, I think the idea is that people think that the steroids are unfair because it lets an average person get to a superhuman level of competitive excellence, which it doesn't. We've already talked about that, but
it kind of does.
But in somebody's mind,
in
the average
mind,
person's mind who has never taken a performance-enhancing drug, who's never been an athlete, has no idea the type of physical dedication and practice.
This boils down to education.
They don't know what goes into it because most people are average and are never going to get to that level.
Well,
but they think
that's what the definition of the word is.
It's not fair that somebody who's just like me is taking this and getting to be a professional athlete.
How much are you willing to sacrifice?
I am with you 100%.
I think it's jealousy.
And
it's jealousy
I am
here
saying, what does fair even mean?
Well, there's no such thing
I don't
as
want
physical equality.
I don't know about you, but in battle and combat, do you want a fair fight?
No.
I want to end them as fast as possible.
I want to just be
Right.
the best.
That's why we have the
in a UFC fight,
most
I wanna
equipped
kill you.
and largest military in the world.
That is
period.
absolutely correct.
And I think that it's worth pointing out that the concept of fairness is a Western construct developed by losers. Like
I don't necessarily disagree. I've never heard it put that way.
We pitch fairness
when it's convenient.
Well, when we're not playing fair.
Right. That's right.
Like,
That's right.
Oh, hey, these Afghans that we're fighting with aren't fighting a fair war.
Yeah.
That's why our troops are dying. We can't figure out
They're
how to
dressing up in women's clothing, blowing themselves
We can't
up
figure
and
out how to
shit.
disseminate a central authority from our puppet government we installed in Kabul.
And
Like, it's not fair. Who gives a shit, man? It's not supposed to be fair. Break the army up, send them into towns, burn everything to the ground, teach people a hard lesson, and
Start
be like,
fresh.
by the way, this other dude's in charge now. We're going home.
So do you guys?
Mic drop.
Yeah. You might want to pick that up.
This is what happens when you don't use steroids.
That's what I was about to say. All right, Matt,
it's just
pick
when
up your
you get
microphone.
older, the balls start to drop.
Yeah, they just start to drop a little. So, Doug, Matt, anything else to add on steroids real quick before we wrap this up?
Just if you're going to do them, if you're going to take a look into it, educate yourself first. Talk to your doctor, do some research, talk to people who have experience. Don't just dive headfirst into it and cause yourself
Yeah, if you're not
any
willing
kind
to
of
do
future
that,
health
don't
issues.
fucking do it.
It's a 21st century, man.
Yeah.
And go to your general practitioner
Yeah.
and you tell them, I feel lethargic. I have cloudy thought. I'm not motivated to do the things that I loved before. The doctor will say, you sound like you're depressed. Do you feel like you're depressed? No, I don't. Could I please get my testosterone levels checked? And then you have a baseline.
Yeah.
And if your baseline is close to the bottom of normal and you don't feel that's right, talk to your GP. Get a prescription.
It's the same thing you do when you want to get your prescription
Yep.
of Xanax or Adderall. You tell them what your symptoms are, and they prescribe it to you because you asked them for it.
Then let's just end that on a positive, healthy
Educate
note.
yourself.
And educational
yourself.
note.
Yeah.
Educate
Exactly.
yourself.
Educate yourself.
Go to your doctor.
And then you
doesn't
too can
matter
be in the
what
NFL.
age you are.
You can be in the
And then
NFL.
you can be in the
Hell
NFL.
no, you
It's as
can't.
simple as that, you guys. Take steroids, be in the NFL. No, so go to your doctor. Do it cautiously. Do it
And if
know,
you're
safely.
not going to do that, stay the fuck away from them.
That's
what's
right.
what's lost on everybody in all this, right, is that the people that we're saying are bad for taking them are legitimately going to doctors to get it. It's not.
Yes.
I mean, aside from the bodybuilding community, that's like more is better.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
the reality is, most people are going through their doctor to get what they're getting.
Well,
100%.
I want to thank both of you guys, Matt,
Thanks a
Doug,
lot.
for coming in for this show. I cannot thank you and Softlead enough for letting us use this studio. Yeah, we have been coming in for about a month and a half, and we have some amazing guests and topics lined up. I'm not going to give anything away. You guys will just have to stay tuned or look on Twitter at JSchmo Sports or on Instagram at the Joe Schmo Sports Show. And so, Dominic, anything lastly to add at all?
No, I just appreciate you guys being here. This was a fascinating conversation.
I'll come back on the next time we have to argue about whether dogfighting is morally correct or not.
Yeah,
Oh,
let's we'll maybe talk about that on a later episode. But for now, let's go ahead and wrap
the Michael
this.
Vick awake.
So thank you for joining the Joe Schmo Sports Show again, guys, and that's a wrap for today.